Welcome to the Authentic Spiritual Journey, a weekly podcast featuring real and practical spiritual conversations from fresh perspectives here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. Today, episode 284, we welcome award-winning poet and author, Heather Lanier. And now your host, Reverend Cynthia Alice Anderson.
Hello and welcome to the Authentic Spiritual Journey. My name is Cynthia Alice Anderson. I'm the host. I'm also lovingly known as RCA to my friends and family. And I guess that's you, dear friends. I'm here today in 818 Studios with my producer.
Good morning, everybody. This is Dave Croft. Welcome back to another episode of the Authentic Spiritual Journey. As always, we love being some of the first voices you hear in a week. Hopefully set a good, positive mood and an intention for what we are confident is going to be an absolutely amazing week just for you.
Yes, friends, we are glad that you're joining us, and we do have a really special show planned for you today. We have a wonderful guest with us, Heather Lanier. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Cynthia Alice. I'm happy to be here. Hi, Dave.
Hello.
Today is a great day. Dave, what show number was it again? 200 and what?
Show 284.
What?
Yeah, 284. Thanksgiving was just last week, and I hope everybody had a good Thanksgiving. And yeah, I'm still getting over my turkey hangover. I think.
It's all about you and your grilling.
We did. Yeah, we smoked the turkey again. So anyway, that's for later when we don't have a very special guest.
Well, friends, welcome to the show. As always, we're honored that you're with us, and we love to do shout outs. It's always amazing to me that the show is in over 100 countries and that we're way over 200,000 downloads now. I don't know how to combine all the numbers. I want to give you a real number, but now that we changed how the feed is coming out and everything. But Dave, who are we doing a shout out to today?
We're giving a shout out to our friends in Denver, Colorado. Listeners, hello, Denver. Hope you are all doing well. Thank you so much for your support and for listening to not only the Authentic Spiritual Journey, but all of the programming there on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel.
I'll tell you, yes, friends, we feel so strongly that we want to be able to support your soul's journey. We also know there's more than one way to grow, prosper, and evolve, and it's why we have a psychologist with 40 years experience on the channel. We also have our amazing Monique McDonald, who found herself and her voice through opera singing and is now coaching people to find their way and their journey through the empowered voice. Her show is called The Magnetic Voice. And today is another part of that journey. Heather, thank you for joining us. So I'm not a big reader of bios, Heather, because I want people just to get to know you. And I know with your authentic style, you're probably the same. But, what I want to first tell our listeners, and I want to give you time to introduce yourself, I want to just tell our listeners how amazing I think your writing is. And for people that are watching on YouTube, I want to hold up your book, Raising a Rare Girl. And was this your first book, Raising a Rare Girl, your memoir, or what was first?
Yeah, I've been writing poetry for a while prior to that too.
Okay.
So I had some shorter poetry collections, but yeah, it's my first long book form. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, such a beautiful story of I've already recommended it to a dear friend, and we, of course, will highly recommend it on our show, and it'll be in the show notes for people to purchase. But, you've also written there's also a new book out, but somehow I want to back up and say, how did you get here? Because sometimes when we listen to speakers, writers, people that we feel like maybe have made it somehow, that we start to compare ourselves in a way that's maybe not helpful. And what we want to hear about is, you've had quite a journey, a spiritual journey, a psychological journey, a journey as a parent, right? As a wife, and your husband is in the ministry. So, you've had quite a journey to get here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I've always been a writer, so that's always been the sort of the thing that I've held on to. And I was studying poetry in college. I was very, very practical major.
Yeah, right.
Poetry. And then I started teaching. I taught in Baltimore with Teach for America, and I was, and then I've just always been teaching. So teaching has been a big part of my vocation, and I teach now at Rowan University through a graduate program. And our students are usually writing like big projects. They're trying to get published. They want to be novelists, and it's really fun to actually talk to them about my own 20 years of publishing and how similar our own fears are. The only difference between my students and I, other than like the 20 years I've had in learning how to write, is that I've spent 20 years with all the same tapes as a doubtful writer that they, have. So when they sit down and hear the voice, "This is no good, I'm a terrible writer," they think it's like true and surprising and like something to listen to. And I sit down, I hear the same voice, and I just go, "Oh, there it is." There it is. And Elizabeth Gilbert of Eat, Pray, Love will tell you the same thing.
Yes.
We're just more adept at dealing, like tolerating and moving through all of those tapes that tell you like you can't do this.
Yes.
Because those always come along when you're trying to make something. When you're being creative, the voices of doubt come along with you.
Yeah, it's so important what you're saying. We on this show would differentiate that as the personality self or the limited self and say, it can be so loud. And it's interesting because I'm teaching a meditation class right now. And some of the students, will say, "Well, my mind is busy." And I start laughing. I go, everybody's mind is busy. I go get in line. Everybody's mind is busy. But what happens over time as you have a discipline, and this is what you're saying, as you have a discipline, you keep writing anyway, you keep showing up anyway, you keep hearing that larger voice that's within you that we might call the soul, that larger aspect of you, the self, that really wants to express. So even though that other voice is there, we learn to tap into that stronger, higher, more, I will say, connected and whole aspect of ourselves.
Yeah. So I'm a writer of nonfiction and poetry, but I did an interview recently with a woman named Annalise Jolly who asked me, "What are your grounding writing practices? Do you have any?" And I thought, no, I actually have grounding spiritual practices, and those are the things that I stick to. So I'm a centering prayer practitioner, and so it's a form of meditation.
Oh yes, that was last week with centering prayer. Awesome, I love it.
Yeah, so my husband is also centering prayer teacher as a priest, and he studied with Father Thomas Keating, who created centering prayer.
Right.
Anyway, the point. So your listeners got a little taste of centering prayer already. So you're just sitting with yourself and you're letting go and consenting to God in yourself and God's presence in you and God's action in you. And so you're repeatedly letting go of whatever comes up, however the mind is busy. And I do that every morning for 30 minutes. That's the grounding practice. And then I guess it sort of rolls into the writing because when those, as you said, like the mind does what the mind does, or at least the brain mind does. I guess.
Yes.
They say that there's like neurological cells in our stomachs too.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so we just kind of work with it. So that's been, as a writer, my grounding practice is my centering prayer practice. And I do an Ignatian practice called the Daily Examine, which is, I find a lot of very fruitful. So you review your day and look at, where the language is consolation and desolation. So like, where was God present? Where was God distant? Or where did you feel alive and full? And where did you feel depleted and, or maybe struggle? And so to reflect on those. So those are my two grounding practices. And then what writing happens is what writing happens. I try to write every day too after that, but I actually start with centering prayer.
Yeah, I think all that you're saying is really so important. And we're this year, especially on the show, we've always been about growth, but somehow this year the focus has been on really becoming a conscious being in every way. And this is what I see you doing, because it's not just about, oh, okay, I have this little spiritual practice and then I go back to my life as normal. It's that the everyday, what some people would even consider the mundane, becomes a reflection, for the spiritual process. And in your parenting, the thing that struck me in your book, Raising a Rare Girl, was you had, some initial practitioners that weren't exactly supportive and didn't know how to reframe, did not know how to language what was going on, with your daughter. And as you found a language, as you, worked through these things, you were much more conscious than the people trying to, quote unquote, support, her journey. So what I hear you saying is exactly what we've been talking about is, I said my ultimate goal is to become a conscious being, to live from the center. And so the type of practices you're doing are to do just that, right? It's not just, here's my spiritual practice over here, and then here's my life. It's that the spiritual and the mundane are wrapped as one, or what we might consider the mundane, because nothing really is mundane, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a hard thing to do, though, right? Because you have your practices, and then you've got your daily life, and how to bring those together sometimes. I do find myself setting an intention in the morning, like I want to give myself more rest in the day, if that's like an intention. And then all of a sudden I notice that by 1 o'clock, I'm like ramming through all this to do.
Right.
So it's good. And so I keep a journal for those things and try to write down maybe that's just as a writer, that's what I want to do, but write down what my intention is for the day and just remind myself a couple times in the day, what was I intending? And those usually, I try to tap into those intentions from that deeper soul place, like to let the still small voice tell me what it is that I'm seeking, rather than, my personality self, as you say, or myself, like directing the agenda. Yeah.
I know that's a practice too. We talk about often on the show. I do that every morning as well, to set my intention for the day. Sometimes I call it my morning pages. Sometimes I call it my I am. Sometimes I call it my intention, but it's all the same. And each morning it's like tapping in. And sometimes the word I get, like this morning, I'm not sure why the word was fearless, but it was. So sometimes it's like my intention is pretty boring, like nobody would care to hear about it. Like it's like grounded, it's not sexy. In other words, everybody now is trying to sell everything as powerful and sexy, and the real work is frankly kind of boring to others at times. But a few days ago it was grounded. Another day it was strong. But it only means to me what it means to me. Like nobody else would even have a clue, even if they saw the word, what my intention was around that, because it's the deeper internal work. So today, for some reason, that word was fearless, and I'm still sitting with that to discover why that is.
Oh, wow. That's exciting. You can explore it all day.
I'm like, okay. Like it came so strongly. I could not write another word. Like I almost fought with the word. Does that make sense?
Yeah. That's inspiring. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see at the end of the day how it came up, or how long the word will be relevant. Like the word that ended up has repeatedly been an important word for me is the word enough. And that is, again, not a sexy word.
Right.
I keep thinking, like, surely there's, joy. Like,
joy. Can I get joy, God, please?
And instead, like, no, enough has been really powerful. Like, what is enough? When is it enough that we're doing? What do we do enough? When do we feel like we have enough? I've been writing that one for over a year, on and off. It's been relevant. But again, it's funny how, it's not a sexy word, and it wouldn't be exciting to others.
Right. Well, and I have there's a little practice I do too, where there's a statement where I use I release and I create. So, and I had one about enough and being enough for nearly a year every day.
Yeah.
I release the idea of not enough. I create goodness, wholeness. Basically it's opposite to know. And that really is the real work. And for some reason, that's reminding me of your TED Talk. I watched it about a week ago, and I think the title, you could please correct me, is "Good and Bad Are Inescapable," or no, "Good and Bad Are Incomplete Stories We Tell Ourselves."
Yeah, that's it.
And I wanted to bring that up, especially for our listeners, because so I'm ordained in the Unity faith, which tends to be happy, happy, joy, joy. There's no bad, and so there's a real shadow, in my view, in the Unity movement and all New Thought that there doesn't want to be an admittance of what is, of what needs to be healed, what needs to be looked at. That said, the polar opposites of good and bad are incomplete stories, right? So it's so I really connected with the through line in your message, and I love the idea of a new understanding of the word normal. I've never been a fan of that word in general because I think there is no normal, and any comparison to make us quote unquote normal is going to be limiting, no matter who we are or what our journey may be. So tell us a little bit about your journey with good and bad, if you would.
Sure. I mean, it always fascinates me when there are when groups of, I guess, spiritual seekers, religious practitioners, ignore the Jesus story. That's a bummer, there's a lot. Jesus comes to like all the human experience,
Oh,
the
yes.
entire human experience, like the rage,
exactly, the pain,
losing friends, right? So there's a full spectrum there, and I think that's God given, right? So when I'll just tell a brief story of the talk is when my very first daughter, I have two. My first daughter was born with a rare chromosomal syndrome, but we didn't know that at the time.
Right.
And the messaging that we got about her body, because she was very small and it didn't fit inside the curve of normal, which is the whole idea of normal is constructed around the same time as eugenics and around the same time as the rise of the Nazis. And so it became very popular to determine who's normal and who's outside of normal. That's like an industrial revolution concept. So it was fascinating and troubling as a new mother to watch people read onto my daughter's body a story of tragedy, because she was very tiny. But then as she developed, she was also developmentally delayed. So her chromosomal anomaly makes it so that she develops differently. And she develops more slowly, and her trajectory of a development is way more uncertain. So we didn't know whether she was going to walk or talk. And she does both of those things.
Yeah,
and,
of course, yes.
With lots of enthusiasm now. She does not stop talking, which is great.
Oh, yes,
And
that's so beautiful when you haven't known. Yeah.
so, so it was this one doctor, the very first doctor the first couple of days of her life before we were released from the hospital, the doctor made this comment about, well, why is she so small? We don't know. And he said, well, it's either bad seed or bad soil, which for him meant like she's either bad or she came from a bad source, like your food wasn't right, or, And
I just want to say, too, the interesting thing about that comment is you were one of those moms that did everything you could possibly do.
Yeah, there's a reason why the word enough is helpful for me.
Yes.
Because I was like, what can I do to make a very, very perfect, absolutely healthy baby? Like so I'll follow all the advice, but come on, give me the other advice, like the heart. I'll follow all of it. So yeah, I did all the things you could possibly think of. To even actually, I didn't even write about this, but I even actually had all the mercury fillings removed from my teeth like years before I gave birth, because I wanted this very, very healthy baby. So yeah, I was pretty particular about food and things like that. And yeah, so that quote was devastating, but also helped me see that these ideas, these concepts of good and bad are human concepts. See, like we've got human concepts of what's good and bad, and then we've got divine concepts of what are good and bad, and that those are not the same. So on the medical world, they were seeing my baby as like bad, as a problem, and from a divine lens, which was gifted with because I was the mother of this beautiful child. I had this brief glimpse of divinity and seeing how good she was, because she's a gorgeous baby and a human being. So that's a little bit of what the talk is about. And then I talk a little bit about how she grows and how I continue to see the ways that these ideas of good and bad, our human ways of interpreting what's good and what's bad are really limited. And we really have to hold those really lightly. So, when we say, oh, this is a bad thing that happened, you really just never know. And some of the the most transformative things are the hard things, the things we thought were bad, that ended up being real gifts, like deep, deep, life-changing gifts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they ended up crucifying our small personalities.
Yes. Yes.
That's why.
Yes.
And that's why if you're a fan of the Jesus story, like the cross is our inspiration.
Oh, yes.
There are things we got to hang up there, and it's painful. Like, it was very painful to work so hard to want to make a baby that would be free from any pain and suffering because she'd be healthy, fully healthy,
and totally loved. And yes. Yes.
I realize I can't guard my children against suffering and pain. Womp womp bummer. Like, that's it. That, who knew that we couldn't do that? I thought I was all powerful, but it turns out I was not.
Well, and that's a beautiful intention to have as a parent, because a big part of parenting is making the best, safest environment, for your child to grow. My son, is exactly the same. And, his birth mom did all the same that you did in terms of taking all the right vitamins and, and all of that. But he is a growing young man. He's 16 now and making his choices. And there's ups and downs, there's pains. But I can plainly see how his soul is growing and developing and that he's learning, So I know both your kiddos, they're being provided with a beautiful environment to do that. And I think as parents, we're simply providing the best container we can that is, a place for them to fall if they need, right? Like, we're going to just provide that container. And, but there is something, I keep saying I want to write a book called Parenting the Soul, because I've worked with so many parents that will read these like how-to books, and then their kids come along and none of that works. And it's like, well, that's because you're trying to put these outer systems on a child that is not built that way, and I think your journey, at least I just only know about the first daughter, right? Because that's what you wrote about. But I could really see how that was your intention, and your husband too, how he was saying, I want to love her better. I want to know more so I can love her better. Like, that was one of the things that really touched my heart, was he wasn't scared going to an appointment. He said he wanted to know more so he could love her better. That's beautiful, beautiful.
It's always helpful in a partnership when one person, there's only one person off the rails at one time.
Yes.
It's good. It's good. He provided lots of grounding in that moment.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, I'd love, we haven't talked at all about your new book, your Psalms of Unknowing. So can you tell us a little bit about that? And I'd love to have you read something from there if you're willing, because you have such a beautiful way of writing. And my hope is that you'll share the show with some of your students and have other people here. And there's nothing, I have an old vinyl of Gertrude Stein reading. It's really interesting. I love to hear people read their own work. So I'd love to hear, you read some of that.
Yeah, so this is a collection of poems that I wrote over a long time. And I've been writing and publishing poems individually for like 18 years. And I've put together little chapbooks that would be, the chapbook is about 30 pages or so in length. But I wanted to sit down and create a cohesive collection. And a lot of these poems were written recently as well. And they all kind of center around an intersection of spirituality and feminism and motherhood. So there's usually some kind of relationship there. I guess I'll read. Do you have a poem? I'll read the last one if you don't have a particular one chosen.
Right. Yes, please, you choose.
Sure. It's a bit of a spiritual. I think the book itself is constructed as a spiritual journey. So there's lots of doubt and struggle and questioning throughout, but there's certainly a lot in the beginning about, how do you bring a child into a world that's so uncertain and that's got so much difficulty, and then we move into poems about just finding some solace and finding some I guess sense of comfort even in unknowing. And so a lot of that comes from my centering prayer practice, that this sort of deep, groundless ground, you could say, the sense of being held by not the exact perfect featherbed pillow that that gives you everything you want, but being held by something even deeper that you don't, and you don't know, that it's there's a sort of deep abyss of safety even in the unknowing. So I get that feeling sometimes in my centering prayer practice, and I did get that feeling too when my husband and I would drive to these very challenging appointments where we didn't know what would happen with my daughter. So eventually I ended up going on a centering prayer retreat that where you have to be silent for about 8 days, and you meditate for 6 30-minute sessions. Nobody talks to each other. You're like in deep silence. So I'll read the last poem, which is called After a Silent Retreat. This is 2 weeks after, actually. How quickly I lose my love of all things. I nearly flick an ant off the cliff of an armchair. But remember, self, the week you spent enveloped in psalms intoned by monks? By Wednesday, you beheld a 3-balled body creeping around the onion skin of your book, its 6 teensy toothpick legs bent into all manner of delicate angles. Your chest became a doorway to a spacious, unmarked heaven. You loved that ant. The kingdom, said Christ, is at hand, meaning not ticking above in a time bomb of gold-paved streets, but tapping antenna along the heartline of your imperfect palm. So that's the end of the book, just capturing a moment where I was looking at this ant, and when I was on retreat, I suddenly had like reverence for all things. And a couple of weeks back, coming home, I was like, oh, there's an ant on my book.
Wait a minute.
Let's just return to that spacious place, and that's what we were talking about earlier, like bringing our practice into our day-to-day. It's a constant reminder, right?
It is. Well, what's so funny is I was doing a retreat, a silent retreat. There's a little place in the middle of Kansas. It's called the Light Center. And this woman had taken this old barn and made it into a retreat center. And I was there, and I was having a beautiful experience outside. Same thing. I was a little ant on a leaf, and then there was a little grasshopper. I was all in it. And 4 days later, it was like it never happened, So, but grateful for the time and grateful for the experience. And like you're saying, it's the coming back to that. I mean, I don't know anybody who lives from this place of connection 24/7. But the idea, in the meditative work and the desire to become conscious, the desire to grow our soul is simply to come into that space more often than not, and
Well, I'm very comforted by all the lines in the Bible where it'll say, and then Jesus went away for a very, for how long? Like,
right. He went apart for a while. It's like, enough, you people. The disciples never knew anything,
Yeah.
How could they be with this guy and be this dumb by but there you go. Yeah. Well, what's next for you, Heather? I know you're, like you say, you're teaching at the university, or you're doing a lot of writing. If people want to find you, is there a way to what's the best way to find info about you and follow your work?
I think right now probably to go to my Substack, which is called The Slow Take, The Slow Take. So if you look me up, Heather Lanier, Lanier on Substack, You can subscribe to that, and then I share like free. Everything's free there. You can donate if you want, but it's all free content. And I write little essays once a month or so. But I also include links to whatever I've published recently. Or you can follow me on Instagram, Heather K. Lanier, Instagram.
Random question: where does your family hail from? Are you what part of the country is your family from?
Yeah, we're from, I'm from outside Philadelphia, actually. And so, and my husband and I moved around a lot for a number of reasons.
Yeah.
We lived in Japan, we lived in California, and then we were living in Ohio and then Vermont. And we've gotten to return to the Philly area because we live 30 minutes away now. So
that is great. I just tell your husband one day I want his tea. Okay, tell him that.
Oh, okay, I will.
I love a really good cup of tea. I love the idea that you make multitask tea and he does.
Multitask tea. So in our house, multitask tea is the tea where you're like, started brewing the tea. Then you went, there's also multitask French press coffee too. Now he's upgraded to that a little bit where it's like, you abandoned it. You thought you could squeeze a load of laundry in there.
No, just stay present.
Yeah, you've made a terrible hot beverage for yourself. That's multitask coffee or tea.
Oh, yeah, I love it. Love it. Well, I thank you for your time today. And I know our listeners have really enjoyed, having you with us. And I would love to put a link to your TED Talk with your permission in the show notes, because I think it's just good. And I think it would be great for any parent of any child to watch it, because I think we do let our, what quote unquote society says, really influence how we view our children. And it's such a holy and sacred connection that, and you bring it back to that, seeing the good, seeing the holy, and seeing, just wishing for, how do I support this soul? And how do I love this soul? So that you do a beautiful, beautiful job with that. So we honor you in your journey and your writing. Wow. Thank you for blessing us with it. And friends, if you have not yet bought Raising a Rare Girl, I want to encourage you to, and also to check out Heather's other works. And Heather, thanks again. And to all of our listeners, thank you all. We're so honored and blessed that you support the show, both with your listening, with sharing, and your financial support. We thank you and bless you and look forward to seeing you next week. And blessings on the journey, dear friends.
Thank you.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Authentic Spiritual Journey here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. This channel is made possible because of listeners just like you. If you would like to support the channel with your tax-deductible contribution on an ongoing basis or through a one-time gift, head over to experienceofthesoul.com/support. The Authentic Spiritual Journey is copyright 2023, Cynthia Alice Anderson, all rights reserved. Our theme music is composed by Dave Croft and used with permission from RR Hot Publishing. The Experience of the Soul podcast channel is a production of 818 Studios.
Hey friends, Sean here, your Experience of the Soul producer. I want to take a moment to tell you about something truly exciting. The Soulworks online community, created by your host, Cynthia Alice Anderson, and available on the Mighty Networks app. If you're looking for a place where you can explore your spiritual path, connect with others, and grow in a meaningful way, then this is for you. Soulworks is so much more than an online community. It's a safe, inclusive space for spiritual exploration, self-discovery, and personal transformation. Inside the community, you'll find everything from uplifting spiritual studies to soul-centered growth practices, meditations, affirmations, and so much more. It's a space where you'll always be supported and never judged. The best part, membership is free. You'll have access to powerful resources, inspiring content, and a supportive group of like-minded people who are all on their own unique spiritual journeys. And if you're ready to dive deeper, there are premium options available to enhance your experience with a live Monday night talk series and extended, deeper meditations. If you're seeking a place to connect, grow, and nurture your soul, we would love to have you join us in the Soulworks community and see where this journey can take you. Visit my.soulworkscommunity.com today.